Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. Sarah felt the sudden shift in the atmosphere the moment she stepped through the glass doors of the dealership. The air smelled of new leather, fresh paint, and the faint, sharp scent of tires, an odd combination of luxury and desperation. She had walked in with a sense of purpose, but now, something didn't feel right. She could sense the looks that followed her, subtle, quick glances, but they were enough to make her feel small. The salespeople, dressed in tailored suits, whispered amongst themselves as if she didn't belong. She had dressed carefully this morning, pulling on a simple blouse and a pair of dark slacks. No designer logos, nothing too flashy. Just enough to look presentable. But that's not how they saw her. She could feel it in their eyes, she wasn't what they were expecting. The salesman who approached her was the first to look her up and down as if measuring her worth in the few seconds it took him to approach. His smile was wide, too wide, and his handshake too firm. His name tag read Brent. He extended his hand as if she should be grateful. "Welcome to Crystal Motors, ma'am. How can I assist you today?" he asked, his voice smooth, almost too practiced. "I'm just looking," Sarah replied, forcing a smile. Brent nodded, his eyes flicking to the luxury cars lined up along the showroom floor. Of course," he said, the words almost dripping with patronization. "You've come to the right place. We've got a great selection of high-end vehicles. I'm sure you'll find something you'll love." Sarah nodded, trying to ignore the way he spoke to her, like she was just another customer he had to entertain. But then again, maybe she was. She didn't come from money. She wasn't wearing the latest fashion, nor did she carry herself with that confidence that came with years of wealth. But what she had was a quiet resolve, a strength that came from working hard every day to build something better for herself and her family. Brent led her over to a sleek, silver sedan parked in the middle of the showroom. It gleamed under the overhead lights, its lines smooth and perfect, like something out of a glossy magazine ad. She let out a soft breath. She had always dreamed of driving something like this. Not out of vanity, but because it represented something more, a symbol of success. "It's a beauty, isn't it?" Brent said, watching her closely. "This one's top of the line. You'll feel like $1 million behind the wheel." Sarah looked at the car, her fingers brushing lightly against the polished surface. It felt out of reach, but it also felt right. She could see herself in this car, driving through the city, the wind in her hair, free from all the struggles that had defined her life up until this point. She could almost hear the hum of the engine, the smooth acceleration. But then, without warning, Brent's tone shifted. He leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing. "Tell me, ma'am," he said, his voice suddenly colder. "What's your budget?" Sarah hesitated. She wasn't about to lie. "I'm not sure yet," she said, keeping her voice calm. "I'm just browsing." Brent raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Right, he said with an almost imperceptible nod. "You see, this car here isn't for everyone. It's a pretty big investment. Most people who come in for this kind of car already have a good idea of what they can afford. It's not something you just stumble into." His words hit her like a slap in the face, but she kept her composure. She wasn't here to argue with him. She was here to look at cars, to give herself a moment of fantasy. She didn't need his judgment. "I understand," she said, forcing the words out. "But I'm still interested in learning more." Brent's gaze lingered on her for a moment, his lips still twisted in that tight smile. He made no move to open the door of the car, didn't offer her a brochure, didn't even try to make her feel welcome. Instead, he stood there, arms crossed, as if he was waiting for her to leave. "I'll just take a look at something else, then," Sarah said, her voice tight. She turned to walk away, but just as she was about to make her way toward the other vehicles, she heard him speak again, his voice low enough that it was meant for her ears only. "You really shouldn't be here," he said, almost sotto voce. "People like you, they don't drive cars like this." The words stung. She stopped in her tracks, her breath catching in her throat. She turned slowly, her eyes flashing. "Excuse me?" Brent didn't flinch. "You heard me," he said, still with that smug look on his face. "People with your lifestyle, your budget, you're just not a good fit for a car like this. It's not meant for someone like you." The words rattled in her mind, but it wasn't just the insult that hit her. It was the cold, calculating way he said it, like it was a fact. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about how he saw her, how he had sized her up and found her lacking. The sudden surge of anger in Sarah was overwhelming. She had worked hard her whole life. She had built everything from scratch. She didn't owe anyone an explanation for her choices. Yet here she was, standing in front of a man who had decided her worth before she even opened her mouth. But instead of confronting him, Sarah forced herself to smile, though the edges of it were brittle. "I think I'll leave," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Thank you for your time." Brent gave a small, dismissive nod, clearly not bothered in the slightest by her departure. She turned and walked briskly toward the exit, her heart pounding in her chest. But just as she was about to push open the door, Brent called out to her. "Oh, and just so you know," he said, his voice sweet now, almost too sweet, "you're not the first person we've turned away. You won't be the last." The door slammed behind her with a finality that made her stomach churn. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, her mind racing. She had never felt so humiliated in her life. But just as she was about to pull out her phone to call her husband, she felt a strange sensation, like she was being watched. She glanced over her shoulder and saw the dealership security guard standing by the door, staring at her. His face was hard to read, but his eyes locked onto hers in a way that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. She turned quickly, not wanting to deal with any more of this nonsense. Her car was parked on the other side of the street. She made her way there, her steps quickening with every passing second. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, something more than just the rude salesman. When she reached her car, she let out a shaky breath and slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind her. She had to call John. "Sarah, calm down," John's voice came through the phone, his tone immediately soothing. "What happened?" Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel as she tried to steady herself. "You won't believe it," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and disbelief. "I walked into the dealership, and she stopped herself, unsure of how to explain the humiliation. "They treated me like I didn't belong there. Like I wasn't good enough for that place." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What did you do?" "I left," she said simply. "I didn't want to deal with them. But I can't stop thinking about it." "What do I do now?" John's voice was calm, too calm. "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." Sarah furrowed her brow. "What do you mean?" "Just trust me," he said. "I'll make sure they regret it." The next day, Sarah was sitting at her kitchen table, sipping coffee, when the letter arrived. It was hand-delivered by a messenger, who didn't say a word as he left. She stared at the envelope, her name written in bold, elegant script. Curious, she tore it open. Inside was a letter from the president of Crystal Motors. It was an invitation, no, a summons. They wanted her to return. "Dear Mrs. Sarah Montgomery," the letter began. "We would like to extend an invitation to you to visit us once again at Crystal Motors. It seems there has been a misunderstanding, and we would very much like the opportunity to make things right. We hope to offer you the service and respect you truly deserve." Sarah stared at the words, her pulse quickening. There was something about this letter that felt off. She didn't know why, but her gut told her that the story wasn't over yet. This wasn't just an apology. This was a new chapter in a mystery she hadn't yet solved. Little did she know, her life was about to change in ways she never saw coming. And this dealership, the one that had rejected her, was at the center of it all. That evening, as she sat in silence, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it. It was John. The message was simple: "Meet me at the dealership tomorrow. I have something to show you." Her heart skipped a beat. She couldn't explain why, but she knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. The day was colder than Sarah had expected. A gray, oppressive sky hung above the city, casting everything beneath it in a muted light. As she walked toward her car, the wind bit at her cheeks, but it wasn't the chill that made her shiver. It was the unease gnawing at her insides, the weight of what she was about to face. She had received John's message that morning. The one that said, "Meet me at the dealership tomorrow. I have something to show you." She hadn't known what to expect, but she knew that John's presence would change everything. He had a way of making people listen, of forcing them to take him seriously, whether they wanted to or not. Sarah had been married to John for almost 10 years. They had built a life together, but it was his world, not hers. John's success was undeniable, but she had never fully embraced it. She had always remained on the sidelines, content with her own modest achievements. But lately, something about their marriage, their life, felt off. She couldn't shake the feeling that John had been hiding something from her. Maybe this was the moment things would change. Maybe today she would finally get the answers she had been seeking. She arrived at Crystal Motors with a sense of foreboding that grew stronger with every step she took. The dealership loomed before her like an imposing fortress, its glass walls reflecting the pale sky. It looked immaculate, as if it had been polished just for her arrival. A black luxury sedan was parked outside, the kind that would catch anyone's eye, a car she could only dream of owning. She glanced around, but there was no sign of John. Her heart skipped a beat. She walked through the entrance, the glass doors whooshing open as she entered. The familiar scent of leather and new cars hit her again, but it didn't comfort her this time. Instead, it felt like a reminder of how out of place she was in this world. The salespeople were more polished than ever, their smiles sharper, their eyes colder. They barely acknowledged her as she made her way to the reception desk. The woman behind the counter looked up at her and nodded curtly. "May I help you?" she asked, her voice flat. "I'm here to meet Mr. Montgomery," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. The receptionist's eyes flickered with recognition. "Right. Mr. Montgomery is expecting you. Please, follow me." Sarah followed the woman through the showroom, her footsteps echoing on the marble floors. The salespeople were now watching her with a subtle intensity, their eyes flicking over her as if they were calculating her every move. It made her feel self-conscious, like she was being dissected by their gazes. The woman led her into a private office at the back of the building. It was larger than she expected, decorated with sleek, modern furniture, but it still had a cold, impersonal feel. The walls were adorned with large photos of expensive cars, each one more lavish than the last. It was the kind of space where deals were made, big, important deals. John was standing by the window when Sarah entered. He turned as she stepped inside, his face a mask of calm professionalism. "Sarah," he said, his voice low, almost too calm. "Good to see you." Her stomach twisted. There was something about the way he said her name, the way he avoided meeting her eyes, that made her feel like she was intruding. She hadn't seen him like this before. "John, what's going on?" she asked, her voice shaking slightly. "What's all this about?" He motioned for her to sit down, and she obeyed, her mind racing with questions. "I know this is sudden," he began, his voice smooth, but there was a tightness to it that she couldn't ignore. "But there's something I need to show you. Something important." Before she could respond, the door opened, and Brent, the salesman who had humiliated her the day before, stepped inside. Sarah froze. She wasn't sure whether to be angry or terrified. Brent smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Montgomery, so glad you could join us." "Brent," Sarah said, her voice tight. "What's going on? Why are you here?" John's gaze flickered to Brent, then back to Sarah. He sighed and sat down across from her. "Sarah, this isn't just about a car anymore. There's more to it. And it's time you knew the truth." Sarah's heart raced. The truth? What truth? Her mind whirled, trying to make sense of what was happening. Brent leaned against the doorframe, crossing his arms. "You've been more involved in this than you realize," he said, his voice dripping with a kind of dark amusement. Sarah's confusion deepened. She felt like she was trapped in a game she didn't understand, her mind struggling to keep up. John let out a slow breath, then spoke again. "You see, Sarah, this dealership, it's not just any dealership. Crystal Motors is a front. A cover for something much larger. Something more dangerous." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" John's expression hardened, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt? Fear? She couldn't tell. "This is why I wanted you to come here today. To see for yourself," John continued, his voice low. "I've been involved in something that's been going on for years. Something I never intended to drag you into. But now," he paused, collecting his thoughts. "Now, it's too late." "Too late for what?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. "What's going on, John? Why didn't you tell me?" John rubbed his temples, as if he were in pain. "I didn't want to get you involved. I thought I could keep it all separate. But I was wrong. This dealership is a front for an international car smuggling ring. They're using these cars to transport illegal goods, drugs, weapons, you name it. And I've been part of it. I've been moving product across borders, laundering money through the sales." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. "You've been—" "Yes," John interrupted, his voice sharp. "I've been working with them. I didn't know how deep it went until it was too late. And now, they're involved in things I can't control. Things that are dangerous." She stared at him, struggling to comprehend what he was saying. This was the man she had married, the man who had promised to protect her, to give her a life of stability. And now, he was telling her that everything they had built was built on lies. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Why didn't you let me help you?" John's face hardened. "I didn't want to bring you into this. I thought I could fix it, handle it on my own. But it's gotten out of control. And now they know about you, Sarah. They know we're married. They know you've been asking questions." Brent stepped forward, his smile widening. "They don't take kindly to people asking questions, Mrs. Montgomery. Not when they don't like the answers." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Brent's eyes gleamed with something dark. "It's too late to back out now. You're already in it, whether you want to be or not." John stood up, his fists clenched at his sides. "That's why I brought you here. I need you to understand the stakes. This isn't just about cars or money. It's about survival. And now that you know the truth, there's no turning back." The room was heavy with tension. Sarah's mind raced, her thoughts scattered in 1,000 different directions. This was too much. She hadn't signed up for any of this. She had simply wanted to buy a car. But now, she was caught in the middle of a web of lies, corruption, and danger. John was right about one thing. There was no going back. Whatever they were involved in, whatever this dealership was hiding, it was too big for her to ignore. As the weight of the situation settled on her shoulders, Sarah knew that this was only the beginning. There were questions that needed answers, and mysteries that needed solving. But for now, all she could do was stand there, stunned, as the two men watched her, waiting for her to decide what to do next. The truth had been revealed. But in Sarah's heart, another question lingered, one that would change everything. What was John hiding now? The heavy silence in the room felt like a suffocating blanket. Sarah stood frozen, the weight of John's revelation pressing down on her chest like a stone. Every word he had said, every sinister detail about the smuggling ring, seemed to echo in her mind, reverberating through her thoughts. She couldn't make sense of it. How had her life spiraled into this? How had she gotten here, standing in the middle of a web of lies and deceit? John's face was unreadable as he stared at her, waiting for her response. Brent, still lurking in the corner of the room, seemed oddly pleased by the tension, as if the whole thing was just some game to him. But Sarah didn't care about Brent right now. She only cared about John. Her husband. The man she had shared her life with. The man she thought she knew. Why? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Why did you get involved in this? Why didn't you tell me sooner? John ran a hand through his hair, his expression strained. I didn't want you to get hurt, Sarah. I thought I could handle it on my own, that I could keep it all away from you. But when they found out about you, when they started looking into our life together, it all started unraveling. So, you just let it go on? She asked, the words coming out in a sharp, accusing tone. You let me live in this bubble of lies, thinking everything was fine, while you were part of something this dangerous? I never wanted you to find out like this, John said, his voice rough with emotion. I thought I could protect you. But now it's too late. They're involved in everything. The money, the cars, the people, they're too powerful. And now that you know the truth, you're in danger too. Danger? Sarah echoed, her mind racing. What do you mean, danger? What are they going to do to me? Brent chuckled darkly from his spot near the door. Don't worry about that, Mrs. Montgomery. The boss has a way of making people disappear. You've crossed a line, and there's no going back now. Sarah's heart sank. She hadn't realized the depth of the danger she was in until now. It wasn't just about her relationship with John anymore. It was about survival. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. I need to get out of here, she said, turning toward the door. I can't be a part of this. John grabbed her arm before she could reach the exit. No, Sarah. You can't leave. Not like this. She shook him off, the panic rising in her chest. You've dragged me into something I don't understand, and now you want me to stay? Do you think I'm just going to sit here and pretend everything's fine? I never wanted this for you. John's voice was desperate, pleading. I didn't want you to know about any of this. I thought I could stop it before it affected us, before it touched you. But it's already too late. And if you walk out that door, they'll find you. They'll make sure you pay for knowing too much. Sarah's mind was spinning. She needed answers. She needed to understand how deep John's involvement went and what the consequences would be if she stayed, or left. But right now, all she could do was stand there, trying to process everything. Brent moved closer, his face smug, enjoying the chaos. You're in too deep now, Mrs. Montgomery. There's no turning back. Whether you stay or go, you'll always be connected to us. You'll always be a part of this. You don't know that, Sarah said, her voice shaking but steady. I'm not a part of anything. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask to be dragged into this mess. You're already in it, Brent said, his voice cold. And you'll stay in it, whether you like it or not. The finality in his tone sent a chill through Sarah's spine. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The woman who had walked into this dealership 2 days ago, hoping to buy a car, to enjoy a simple, ordinary day, was gone. In her place stood someone who had just learned that everything she knew about her life had been a lie. "I don't want to be involved in this," Sarah said, her voice firm despite the fear building in her chest. "I didn't ask for this. And I'm not staying here for any of it." John stepped forward, his eyes pleading. "You have to understand, Sarah. You don't have a choice. This thing, this mess, it's bigger than both of us. It's bigger than anything I ever imagined. They'll come after us. They'll come after you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "Who will?" "The ones who run it all," John said, his voice tight. "The ones behind Crystal Motors. They'll stop at nothing to protect their operation. And if they think you're a threat." Sarah's mind was racing, trying to piece everything together. She had never asked for any of this. All she had wanted was to live a quiet life, to enjoy the simple moments. But now, it seemed like her world had been shattered. And no matter what she did, she couldn't undo what she now knew. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Sarah froze, her pulse quickening. John and Brent looked at each other, their expressions hardening. John motioned toward the door. "Stay here," he whispered to Sarah, his voice tense. "Don't move." But Sarah couldn't just stay here, not now. She had to know what was going on, what John was hiding. She couldn't stand by and let things unfold without understanding the full picture. With every ounce of courage she could muster, Sarah silently moved toward the door. She pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath as she waited for the door to open. The last thing she wanted was to be caught eavesdropping, but she had no choice. The door creaked open, and a man stepped inside. He was tall, wearing a dark suit that seemed too expensive for anyone not involved in something shady. His eyes were cold and calculating, scanning the room with a practiced gaze. "This is the one?" the man asked, his voice deep, laced with authority. "Yes," John replied, his voice low. "She knows. It's only a matter of time before they come for us." "Then we need to move quickly," the man said, his gaze landing on Sarah for the first time. He didn't seem surprised to see her there, almost as if he had expected it. "Is she ready?" "Ready?" Sarah echoed, her heart pounding. "What do you mean, ready?" The man's gaze sharpened, and for the first time, Sarah felt a real sense of danger. "It's time," he said. "She either becomes part of this, or she becomes a liability." John's voice was barely a whisper. "Sarah, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be." Sarah's mind was racing, but one thing was clear, she was caught. There was no way out. The truth was bigger than her, and now, there was no going back. She had become a part of something she couldn't escape. A part of something that was far more dangerous than she ever could have imagined. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The world outside the room felt distant, as if it were spinning on a different axis. But Sarah knew one thing for sure, everything she thought she knew about her life was a lie. And in this moment, she had to decide what kind of woman she was going to become. Was she going to fight, to find a way out, no matter the cost? Or was she going to accept the role she had been forced into? As the man's cold eyes stared at her, Sarah made her decision. The truth was a heavy burden to carry, but now she had no choice but to face it head-on. The door closed behind the man, and Sarah felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. John's face was pale, his eyes haunted by something she didn't understand. But she couldn't focus on him right now. She couldn't focus on any of it. "I don't know what to do," John admitted quietly, his voice barely audible. "Then let me decide," Sarah said firmly. "I'll find my own way." It wasn't a declaration of surrender. It was a promise. The city lights flickered in the distance, but Sarah's mind was clouded by the darkness of the room she found herself in. The walls, once merely a backdrop to the everyday hustle of Crystal Motors, now felt like they were closing in on her. The weight of the decisions she had to make pressed on her chest with an unbearable heaviness. What she had walked into was far from ordinary. This wasn't just about betrayal. It wasn't just about a man she thought she knew. This was about survival. John had gone silent after the meeting with the man in the suit. Sarah had seen the flicker of something in his eyes, guilt, fear, maybe even regret, but it didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that she was in far deeper than she ever intended to be. There was no easy way out. The question wasn't how to escape. The question was whether or not she could live with what she knew now. She had spent the night awake, pacing back and forth in the hotel room she had checked into after leaving the dealership. Every corner of the room seemed to close in on her. Her mind was filled with images of Crystal Motors, of Brent's smug face, of the cold, authoritative man who had walked in. Each of them had become pieces in a puzzle she couldn't quite solve, and yet it was clear that the final picture had already been drawn. It wasn't about her anymore. It was about something bigger. But she wasn't powerless. At least, she told herself she wasn't. The quiet ringing of her phone broke the silence in the room. She picked it up without looking at the caller ID, her hands trembling slightly. "Hello? Sarah, it's me. John." His voice sounded different now, sharper, more distant. As if the man she had married had just stepped further away from her. "What do you want, John?" she asked, her voice quiet, but her words filled with an edge she hadn't intended. She was tired. Tired of pretending everything was okay, tired of pretending like she wasn't living in the shadow of lies and deception. "Listen, I need to talk to you." "We need to get on the same page, Sarah," John said, urgency creeping into his voice. "I know this is hard, but you need to understand what's at stake. The people we're dealing with, this isn't just some shady business deal. It's life and death." Sarah felt a wave of anger rise in her chest. "Life and death? You don't get to pull me into your mess and then talk to me like everything is fine. I'm not some helpless bystander in this, John. I'm part of this now, whether I want to be or not." She paused, taking a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what you want from me. I don't know how you think I'm supposed to help you get out of this." There was silence on the other end of the line for a long moment before John spoke again, this time in a more somber tone. "I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't want any of this to happen. But I've already made too many mistakes. And now, I'm going to fix them. You don't have to be part of this if you don't want to be. But you have to trust me when I say that I'm trying to protect you." "Protect me?" she echoed, her heart sinking. "You've been keeping secrets from me for years, John. And now you're telling me you're trying to protect me?" She could hear the guilt in his voice when he spoke again. "I know I've hurt you, but the truth is, I never wanted to put you in danger. If I could take it all back, I would." "Then help me understand," she said, her voice now calm but full of resolve. "How do I get out of this? How do we get out of this?" John's voice dropped to a whisper, filled with regret. "You don't. There's no walking away from this, Sarah. Not now." Her heart dropped as the gravity of his words sank in. There were no easy answers. No quick solutions. She had to accept that the world she once knew was gone, replaced by something far more sinister. A world where her choices didn't matter as much as her survival. "I'm sorry," John repeated. "I should have told you everything. I should have warned you." She closed her eyes, trying to push the tears back. The pain was raw, sharper than anything she had ever felt. "It's too late for apologies," she whispered. "I don't know who you are anymore." John's voice trembled. "I am still your husband, Sarah. I still love you. I always will." But we need to do this together. There's no way out unless we stick together. You're wrong, she said, her words firm. There's a way out. There has to be. John sighed heavily on the other end of the line. Sarah, there's no going back now. The people we've crossed, they'll do anything to keep their operation running. If they think you're a threat, they'll come for you. I need you to trust me. For once, trust me. His words hung in the air, a challenge and a plea all at once. Sarah didn't know what to believe. But one thing was clear, she couldn't stay in the dark anymore. She couldn't just follow John blindly, not when her life, her very future, was on the line. She had to take control. She had to make a choice. As she stared out of the window at the city stretching out beneath her, Sarah made up her mind. This wasn't just about her and John. This was about something bigger, about a system built on lies, manipulation, and corruption. And she wasn't going to let it swallow her whole. It wasn't long before Sarah found herself back at the dealership, back in the place where it all began. The glass doors opened with a faint swish as she stepped inside. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she was determined. This time, things would be different. She was going to find out everything. Every hidden truth. Every lie. The showroom was eerily quiet, the sleek cars parked in neat rows, their polished surfaces reflecting the dim light. It was as if nothing had changed, as if the world outside hadn't turned upside down. But Sarah could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. She walked up to the reception desk, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The receptionist looked up, her gaze flickering with a brief moment of recognition. "You're back," the receptionist said coolly, not bothering to hide the disdain in her voice. "I need to see Brent," Sarah said, her tone unwavering. The receptionist hesitated, glancing over at the back office. "He's not available right now," she replied, her voice flat. "I'll wait," Sarah said, taking a seat in one of the chairs. She didn't care if Brent wasn't available. She wasn't leaving until she got the answers she needed. After a tense few minutes, the door to the back office opened. Brent stepped out, his expression a mixture of annoyance and amusement. "Back again?" he asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I need to talk to you," Sarah said, her voice steady. "I want answers." Brent's smile faded, and for the first time, there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "You don't know what you're asking for, Mrs. Montgomery," he said in a low voice. "I think I do," Sarah replied, her gaze unwavering. "I think I know exactly what I'm asking for." He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "You have no idea what you're up against. You think you can just waltz in here and demand answers? You're already in too deep, Sarah. There's no walking away now." "I'm not walking away," she said. "But I want to know who's pulling the strings. Who's behind all of this?" Brent hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "You really want to know?" Sarah nodded, her voice hard. "I do." For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, with a sigh, he leaned closer to her. "You're not going to like it. But I'll tell you. The name's Grant Larkin," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's the one behind all of this. He's the one who runs the operation." "Grant Larkin?" Sarah repeated, her pulse quickening. "Who is he?" Brent's eyes flickered with a mix of fear and respect. "He's the one you don't cross. He's the one who makes the rules." Sarah's heart raced as the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. Grant Larkin was the key. He was the one who controlled everything, everything she had been pulled into. But who was he? And why had John become involved in his web? "I need to see him," Sarah said, her voice firm. "I need to talk to him." Brent looked at her as though she were crazy. "You think you can just walk up to Larkin and ask questions? You're insane." "I don't care," Sarah said, her determination growing. "I'm going to find him, and I'm going to get the answers." For the first time, Brent looked genuinely concerned. "You're not ready for this, Sarah. You don't know what you're getting yourself into." "I don't care," she repeated, her voice full of resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes." The final piece of the puzzle had been laid out before her, and now Sarah had one choice to make: to confront the man behind it all, to find out the truth. And in doing so, she knew the stakes had never been higher. This wasn't just about uncovering the lies anymore. It was about survival. With a steady breath, Sarah stepped into the unknown.